Greetings, members one and all of the Salivation Nation. Silver has popped up above $25 an ounce, and it is trying to break out. Let's explore. Yes, a little bit of technical analysis here from FX Empires talking about how it has a bit of a rally here. It did reach almost $25.50 today, but it's an area where there's a bit of resistance. But this is a resistance that could be relatively soft, as it looks like silver's trying to break out. Silver markets have rallied significantly during the trading session on Wednesday to reach towards the $25.50 level. This is an area that could offer a bit of resistance, but it is likely this will come down to the US dollar and perhaps even more importantly, stimulus going forward. If the market continues to see stimulus, or what they like to call relief, as being likely, then it makes quite a bit of sense that the US dollar would fall, thereby putting upwards pressure on silver itself. With that in mind, pay close attention to the news coming out of Washington, D.C. and stimulus. And that is really where the overall fundamentals are with regards to where the prices of silver can go because of politics coming into play. That being said, another thing you can do is to watch the dollar index, as it tends to run inverse of precious metals, as we've discussed on this channel plenty of times. Silver is highly sensitive to it as a result. With that being the case, and the fact that the contract is extraordinarily thin, people should be paying close attention to how things correlate, as the markets are essentially running on stimulus and stimulus only. Nothing else seems to matter, and sometimes that is just how the markets behave. They'll focus on one thing and then move on to the next. And that's true, and that's why typically a lot of the technical analysis, when you take a look at it, you can have signs that can point to one trend or another based off of where that is going, and look at historic precedents. It would make sense for silver to catch up to gold. Now, is this always the case? And this is where the technical analysis does come into play. One thing we do know is the volatility of silver, both on the upside and downside. As of the recording of this video, we can see that silver has almost doubled gold's performance on the day based off of a percentage rise. And so that is kind of where the trend line that we're seeing here. And that's why one can say that once it reaches a resistance and it goes past that resistance, we could see it climb up and narrow that gap even further. The gold to silver ratio is now comfortably below 80. It's now almost 76.95 as of the recording of this video. And that could narrow if we see prices continue to climb for gold in the coming days. I did post a video a while ago that we very well could see gold and silver remain low or go lower as the dollar strengthens heading up towards the election. But that is not the case today, as we've seen a pretty strong rise. And even in prior days, we've seen gold and silver maintain or increase a little bit. But today was a fairly bigger jump than we've seen in the past couple of days. Nothing earth-shattering by any stretch. But demand is totally irrelevant, as the article continues, and it says, even though the idea of a stimulus increasing demand is a bit of a farce, the reality is that the market is moving on that narrative. This will be the fourth stimulus package that we've had, and it does not increase demand for things like crude oil. So it's difficult to imagine how silver will see more industrial demand in this regard. So that's the antithesis to a closing gold to silver ratio, and why that $25.50 resistance level may hold stronger than we would expect. As for being a hard asset avoiding fiat destruction, of course, that is a completely different story. and that is the basic consensus that we all have as stackers of silver, is that it does provide a way to protect ourselves against a falling dollar. And that's really what's happening today. Silver is reacting to the markets and to the dollar, and that will continue to I think, uplift silver in a manner of form as we move into the election deadline here. So how will this play out in the end? It's anybody's guess, as is in the case. People have been forecasting what's going to happen here, and the end being, the wake of after the election. I believe that there is unrest in the streets after the election as results come in, or as we're waiting for election results to come in, because it may be up to a week for these mail-in ballots to be counted. And if it hinges on those, there could be unrest leading up to that, and that is going to cause weakness in the dollar, I believe, from the other nations around the world, because they're going to see the United States as being somewhat unstable, at least for the time being, during the concern of the election. The last time we had uncertainty in an election to the magnitude that they're predicting this time was back in 2000. But there wasn't this unrest and massive protest that we've seen over the course of the past few years. And I believe that most accurately are predicting there's going to be, if there is a massive, if there's any kind of question about the results or the validity of the election results that are to come into play here. Let's see how it pans out. But silver is trying to break out. And I believe that you can probably pretty much make that argument, especially when you see it coming close to resistance levels, and $25.50 is a resistance level here. But, but especially when you see the rate of increase of the silver price compared to gold, and that's been consistent. It's been consistent on the way up. It's also been consistent on the way down, which is why we should not necessarily get our hopes up too much that this trend is going to continue. Even if it does pass that resistance level and it breaks out, it could break down just as easily. And that is the message that I think should be understood by all, is that breaking out does not mean that it cannot break down in the future. But the fact that it is trying, I think, says something. And I believe that, we're out of the woods in terms of 100-to-1 ratio, or even really an 85-to-1 ratio. But we could be seeing these new normals of the ratio being, somewhere around 80 or 75-to-1. And that very well could be the new normal here on out. Not sure how it's going to play out in the end. If there's some massive unrest and gold continues to climb and reach new highs again, will silver get back up to $30 an ounce again? I just don't know. I'd like to think it would. I'd like to think it should. But overall, even though we've seen the volatility of silver rise, the consistency of gold has outpaced, I believe, silver in that long upward trend. But it's on that backdrop that when we accumulate silver, we do so understanding its volatility and also hanging tough and hanging in there when it takes a nosedive on some days. It's a volatile metal. It's an industrial metal, and it's also a monetary metal. But the monetary aspects of the metal, and as a hedge against economic instability, are lost on some. And these days, especially in the marketplace, they're buying it essentially as a commodity with the SLV and the ETFs, although I think there's some manner of form when you do buy those paper silver, I think there's maybe some idea that maybe you're diversifying and hedging yourself against the stock market in that regard, and that's true. But what about for copper shares and other commodities out there? There's some diversification that move in those assets, as well as real estate holdings in the stock market. So, but nonetheless, it is something that we will keep an eye on, and I just wanted to bring this to you today. Post your thoughts below about silver making an attempt to break out. I'd like to extend a multitude of gratitude to you all for taking the time to watch, and encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.